All right, so this is my assignment for this week's lab for week 8. I'm just showing my workspace. I don't have any like notes or my laptop or anything like that. So we start with the skin. So the epidermis has 5 layers, or 4, depending on the place of the body. If it has 5 layers, it starts with this top layer right here, which is our stratum corneum. If it's the palms of the hands or the bottoms of the feet, we have a stratum lucidum. Beneath that, we have our stratum granulosum. Underneath that, we have our stratum spinosum. And at the very bottom, we have the stratum basal. In this illustration, the melanocyte is right here. And then these colored in dots are the keratinocytes. As I mentioned, the epidermis is made of 4 to 5 layers. This is the top part, is the epidermis. Beneath that is our dermis, and then the hypodermis. The epidermis is separated from the dermis by this basement membrane right here. Within the dermis, it's made up of 2 layers. Our papillary layer right here at the top of the dermis contains blood vessels, which are drawn here on mine. And then this lower, more large layer is the reticular layer, which contains our sweat glands and our sebaceous glands. Sebaceous glands create sebum, and sebum is a oil that coats our skin and hair to keep it moist and from drying out. Let's see, I think that covers all of that. So moving on to the compact bone. This illustration right here in itself is an osteon. The different rings or circles here, the different layers of the osteon, are known as the concentric lamellae. On the concentric lamellae, we see our lacunae. The ones that are colored in actually have osteocytes within them, and off of the lacunae are these canalicula. The central canal, drawn in the center here, contains our blood vessels such as veins and arteries and nerves. Going on to the circumferential lamellae. So this is our compact bone right here. The compact bone is surrounded by this periosteum, and on the border of the compact bone, which is touching the periosteum, is our circumferential lamellae. And that should cover all of those. Moving on to the bones and muscles. Our cervical vertebrae are made up of 7 vertebrae, basically from the skull down to the rib cage or your clavicle in the front. Really, it's kind of that line, but it's 7 vertebrae. The diaphragm actually fits in this cavity beneath our sternum and is a muscle. The external abdominal oblique muscles, so drew down here, which is makes up the external or outside area of the torso. The frontal bone, as the name implies, is this front bone on the skull. You can see the suture right here, so it's this frontal bone. The hyoid is actually a floating bone located here, not on the skeleton. It's better known as your Adam's apple. Our lumbar vertebrae is beneath our thoracic vertebrae. So the thoracic vertebrae is a vertebrae connected to our rib cage, even the floating ones, and that is made up of 12 vertebrae, and then the lumbar is made up of 5 vertebrae here. And the thoracic vertebrae leads us into our sacrum, which is fused vertebrae. This is the sacrum. And then at the bottom, we have our coccyx bone right here, and better known as the tailbone. Moving back to the lumbar, and now to the mandible, which is the movable part of our jaw. The maxilla is this top section right here where your teeth connect at the top. The nasal bone is right up here at the bridge of the nose, right here. Our occipital bone is, excuse me, this lower back area, right up in here, sorry about that. This is the occipital bone. The parietal bone is actually touches the occipital bone. It makes up kind of the 2 halves of the top section right here. Sorry. The rectus abdominis muscle is better known as a 6-pack. There's actually 8 muscle groups, but we refer to it as a 6-pack right here. We go over the sacrum and coccyx. The sphenoid bone is inside of the skull. It goes behind the orbits, but on our skeleton, it's right up in here. You can see the side of it, this small section right here. The sternocleidomastoid bone runs from the side of the neck on each side. You can actually get your pulse near this section, and it actually runs forward into the clavicle. So it's two muscle masses. The sternum right here is this flat 3-piece bone up in the front. Our temporal bone is where your temples are, and it's right next to our sphenoid bone. So right here is the temporal. We already went over the thoracic vertebrae. The trapezius muscle, better known as your traps when you're working out, run from the back of the neck to basically the base of the skull over to the shoulder blade, and they actually run along the thoracic vertebrae on both sides. So it's just like this big winged muscle right here. And the zygomatic bone, better known as your cheekbones, the one on each side, and it's this little piece of bone right here. There's actually a cut or a break right here. So it's this front part up in here on each side.